Okay, so now we are going to start chapter 1, Bill's story. We have successfully gotten through the Roman numerals, and we are now on page 1 of the big book. And notice, page 1 of the big book does not ask us to admit we are alcoholic. Bill's story is from page 1 to 16. You're going to either need to print out the Doom Curve worksheet or just get a blank piece of paper. So there is a line in chapter 1, Bill's story, that talks about a ski jump. So your line on your piece of paper should be similar to a ski jump. And here it is. Somebody in the Big Book study actually looked this up. This is what a ski jump looks like. All right. And now I used to read this as a quick story and did not know it was my story. Bill's story is all of our story. Now that I'm convinced of that, I crossed out Bill's story and I put my name. After we go through the chapter, it will be clear on how and why. So right now, you have two things to keep track of as we go through chapter 1. The blank piece of paper for the Doom Curve, and as we go through, I suggest that you circle all of the I's in Bill's story, just like in your book, if you're willing to do that. And we'll show you why in just a second here. Okay, so real quick, when I got into Alcoholics Anonymous, I was 17 years old, female, obviously, teenager, and could not Bill's story was so boring to me, and I was like, I can't relate to this guy. He's like male and in the military, studied business, law, economics. Like, no, I just kind of sat through and endured Bill's story whenever I was in a meeting where we were reading it or something like that. I must have gone through it hundreds of times before seeing it in the light that we are going to see it today. War fever ran high in the New England town to which we new young officers from Plattsburgh were assigned, and we were flattered when the citizens took us to their homes, making us feel heroic. Here was love, applause, war, moments sublime with intervals hilarious. I was a part of life at last. This is the first entry on the Doom Curve. Not feeling a part of. Can you relate to that? Can you relate to not feeling a part of? That was probably the strongest feeling I felt all through school. As a young kid, just anywhere I was, I felt like an anomaly, an awkward person. No one understood me. Just couldn't wait for those social interactions to end. So, not feeling a part of life. And in the midst of the excitement, I discovered liquor. I forgot the strong warnings and the prejudices of my people concerning drink. That is ignoring or forgetting a family disposition towards alcoholism, which I was totally aware of. I come from a long line of English, Irish alcoholic women, just one spectacular alcoholic after another. I knew it was in my blood. And in time, we sailed for over there. I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol. Now, loneliness. So we have 3 entries on our Doom Curve: not feeling a part of, ignoring family bloodlines of alcoholism, and loneliness. Already, I'm relating to Bill more than I ever have. Okay, frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. Yeah, that's kind of a message here in this paragraph. So we landed in England and I visited Winchester Cathedral. Much moved, I wandered outside. my attention was caught by a dog roll on an old tombstone. So, a dog roll is a poem. And here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier is never forgot, whether he dieth by musket or by pot. So we have a lot going on with Winchester Cathedral. It's an important part of Bill's spiritual message. And right here, this means cross-reference and pass it on. Page 60, 61, 120, and 242. Bill brings up Winchester Cathedral quite a bit, and it was a powerful impact on his spiritual journey. We are not going to stop and read Pass It On right now, but I suggest that you do that after this is over. And when it says by pot, that doesn't mean marijuana as we understand it today. It's another word for a tankard of beer. And here's a picture of it. So they just drank, beer in big, large cups like crazy. Warning, which I failed to heed. So ominous means portending evil or harm, foreboding, threatening, or inauspicious. So he is feeling that as he reads this dog roll on the tombstone, he's feeling an ominous warning. And that would be the next entry on the doom curve, is to fill in your ominous warning. You may have to think about this for a while. I'm going to give you a short example right now of an ominous warning for my own life, just sharing my personal experience on what mine is, which I think that you should have at hand when you're taking someone else through the book, is to share yours as well. When I was 19, I worked at a place, and the guy that I worked with was 26 years old, and he was drunk all the time. I mean, his face was red, he was swollen, he had severe alcoholism, yet he came to work every single day. And basically, he and I managed the day shift. And I was 19 years old. I'm just, so young, not sure what's exactly going on here. But anyway, I had shared with him that I go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And he called me one day and asked me to bring him over a big book to his house. And he called it The Big Blue. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. So I went and bought a big book, and I drove over to his house. No one was home. No one answered the door. I left it on the doorstep. Within like the next 3 days, all kinds of things happened. I relapsed. I got drunk. I went and I picked up a drink. I was 6 drinks in, and the phone rang, and it was work saying that this person that I'm speaking about had driven to an alcohol treatment center and was denied entry due to his insurance. And when he left the hotel or the hospital, couldn't get in, he stopped at the McDonald's, which was right there on the same street, and he died of DTs in the bathroom. And I got this phone call after I just picked up a drink, and I was 6 drinks in. And I couldn't help but think about this sentence in the big book. And because I was like, I'm 19 years old. I'm too young. I'm not even 21. I had this whole age thing going on, that I couldn't be alcoholic, and I had so much life to live. And yet I got a call of a 26-year-old that I knew that died of DTs in a McDonald's bathroom floor. And I immediately went and checked in to a hospital and went into a women's recovery home. I just started on, and I had long-term sobriety after that. So you want to figure out what your ominous warning is, and you want to help others figure out what it is. This is on our doom curve. How many ominous warnings have we failed to heed? So 22 and a veteran of foreign wars, I went home at last. I fancied myself a leader. Where does that happen? In the ego mind. For not have the men of my battery given me a special token of appreciation. Okay, well, the first time I read that, I'm thinking something like a Purple Heart or some like magnificent military medal or something, when really it was the guys in his platoon gave him a watch, and his whole job was to just load and fire. He just put bullets in and fired. So can you see how these things aren't lining up? How the ego mind has exaggerated this? My talent for leadership, I imagined, would place me at the head of vast enterprises, which I would manage with the utmost assurance. All right. Now ask yourself, how many times has Bill said I in this paragraph? Notice all of the I's as we go through this. So Bill is self-centered and his plans are about himself. And when he says manage with the utmost assurance, he's talking about controlling, right? Basically, he's saying there's no problem and I know what I'm doing. Does that sound familiar? All right, continue to circle the I's. I took a night law course and obtained employment as investigator for a surety company. The drive for success was on. That is the next entry on the doom curve, that drive for success. And as we mentioned last time, alcoholics tend to have above average intelligence, special abilities, skills, and aptitudes. And so in other areas of their life, they can really accomplish some things for a short period of time in perhaps in work or sports or music or something like that. The drive for success was on. I'd prove to the world I was important. Feeling unimportant. Driven for success, feeling unimportant, talking about themselves a lot. Okay. My work took me about Wall Street, and little by little, I became interested in the market. Many people lost money, but some became very rich. Why not I? So I studied economics, business, as well as law. What? Is that not a lot? Potential alcoholic that I was, I nearly failed my law course. At one of my finals, I was too drunk to think or write. Okay. Here's the next entry in our doom curve. Though my drinking was not yet continuous, it disturbed my wife. This is the next entry. The drinking is not yet continuous, but it does disturb others. Check your own experience. Does your drinking disturb other people? Are they calling the cops? I got the cops called on me quite a bit for my stages of a spree. So we had long talks when I would still her forebodings by telling her that men of genius conceive their best projects when drunk. I cannot tell you how many times I have heard that. So he is politely saying to Lois, F you, don't challenge my drinking, right? So are people challenging your drinking, questioning your drinking? And what is your reasonable justification for it? Okay. Continue to circle the I's. On this paragraph, we've got driven for success, feeling unimportant, drinking not yet continuous, drinking disturbs others, and basically the people that are challenging you finding a way to tell them to go kick rocks. By the time I had completed the course, I knew that law was not for me. The inviting maelstrom, which means whirlpool, of Wall Street had me in its grip. Business and financial leaders were my heroes. Out of this alloy of drink and speculation, so alloy is a mixture, I commenced to forge the weapon that would one day turn flight in its boomerang and all but cut me to ribbons. So boomerang is an interesting word that Bill uses often, and you can read more about that in Pass It On page 30. So the story is his grandfather, I believe, that may be wrong, but someone in his family told him that only Aborigines in Australia successfully made a boomerang. that no one else has been able to successfully make a boomerang. And so Bill took that as a challenge, right? Thinking about what we just said, he's driven for success, he wants to prove he's important, yada, yada, yada. So he takes this as a way to prove to that person in his family how great he is. So living modestly, my wife and I saved $1,000. Okay, hold on a second. Who's the wife? All this time it's been I. It's been Bill, 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 all about Bill. All of a sudden, there's a wife. It's the first mention of Lois, and it's the moment when he needs her for something. Can you see that? So having people that you may, people in life that you genuinely care about, I'm sure, but there's this such a deep self-centeredness that is what purpose can they serve, right? So you can read more about this particular thing. Poor Lois, she doesn't look too happy in the photos. It went into certain securities, then cheap and rather unpopular, and I rightly imagined that they would someday have a great rise. I failed to persuade my broker friends to send me out looking over factories and management, but my wife and I decided to go anyway. So actually, Bill was a trailblazer in this industry. He changed the way that there's research done in stock market investing. And it has a specific phrase and name, but I just can't remember what it is right now. It's very interesting. Bill's been a trailblazer in multiple areas of his life. So I developed a theory that most people lost money in stocks through ignorance of markets. I discovered many more reasons later on. So okay, all this time you've been circling the I's, right? Now it's a we. Why is it a we? Because he needs Lois for something. We gave up our positions and off we roared on a motorcycle. The sidecar stuffed with tent, blankets, a change of clothes, and 3 huge volumes of financial reference. Our friends thought a lunacy commission should be appointed. Perhaps they were right. Okay, you can see a picture of this and pass it on page 71. Excuse me. I had some success at speculation, so we had a little money, but we once worked on a farm for a month to avoid drawing on our small capital. Next entry on the doom curve. That was the last honest manual labor on my part for a day. We covered the whole eastern United States in a year, and at the end of it, my reports to Wall Street procured me a position there and the use of a large expense account. The exercise of an option brought in more money, leaving us with a profit of several $1,000s that year. So suddenly it's we. Look how many times I have been circled. For the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived. What happened to the we? What about Lois? She worked on the farm. She gave sacrifices. She gave up her position. She ran in the sidecar. So the point here is the self-centeredness of Bill. My judgment and ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. The great boom of the late 20s was seething and swelling. Drink was taking an important and exhilarating part in my life. Next entry on the doom curve. Drink was taking an important and exhilarating part of life. There was loud talk in the jazz places uptown. Okay, at this time, it was the Prohibition area, which was January 17th, 1920 to December 5th, 1933. So these jazz places are illegal drinking locations such as speakeasies. So he's engaging in illegal activity. That could be the next entry in our doom curve is illegal activity. Everyone spent in thousands and chattered in millions. Well, this is delusional. Not everyone spent in thousands and chattered in millions. Scoffers could scoff and be damned. I made a host of fair-weathered friends. Next entry on the doom curve is fair-weathered friends, one who stops being your friend once you don't have a whole lot to offer. So that is definitely clear in my life. While I had drugs and alcohol or money, if I had drugs, alcohol, money, there were people all around. As soon as that dried up, nowhere to be found. It gets worse. So my drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. That's the next entry, continuing all day and almost every night. The romances of my friends terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf. So lone wolf, all alone, next entry, not even the fair-weathered friends are around. There were many unhappy scenes in our sumptuous apartment. An unhappy scene in an apartment with an alcoholic might be throwing things, yelling, screaming, domestic violence, police being called, things, I'm sure you can think of many examples. There had been no real infidelity. Infidelity is the next thing on the doom curve. For loyalty to my wife, helped at times by extreme drunkenness, which kept me out of those scrapes. What that means, and this is harsh, is that the alcohol prevented him from getting an erection. Sorry, that's crude, but that's what we're talking about here. In 1929, I contracted Gulf fever. We went at once to the country, my wife to applaud, while I started out to overtake Walter Hagen. Whoa, that's a tall order. Liquor caught up with me much faster than I came up behind Walter. I began to be jittery in the morning. That's the next thing on our doom curve, is jittery in the morning, and is a reference to the beginning of delirium tremens, DTs. Golf permitted drinking every day and every night. Now we're choosing activities that permit drinking. Next entry on our doom curve, join a pool league, a bowling league, golfing, whatever. It's not, perhaps it's a masquerade for really, I can spend a lot of time here and drink. Yeah, so check your own experience. Did you choose activities that permitted drinking? It was fun to caroom around the exclusive courts which had inspired such awe in me as a lad. I acquired the impeccable coat of tan one sees upon the well-to-do. So some people argue about this. It could be a suntan because he's outside, or it could literally mean a camel coat, which was expensive and kind of disgusting, right? But I acquired the impeccable coat of tan one sees upon the well-to-do. The local banker watched me whirl fat checks in and out of his till with amused skepticism. Okay, so these asterisks here show what should be on the doom curve at this time. Drinking continually all day and almost every night. Lone wolf, not even the fair weather friends are around. Unhappy scenes at home. Infidelity or inability to actually engage in sex. Jittery in the morning, beginning of DTs, and activities that permitted drinking. So what we're doing here in chapter 1 is we are pulling out the progression of alcoholism from Bill's story, and we're calling it the doom curve. This makes chapter 1 a lot more valuable to me, because all I could see was like, I'm not like Bill, and then the mind was shut. So abruptly in October 1929, hell broke loose on the New York Stock Exchange. After one of those days of inferno, I wobbled from a hotel bar to a brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market closed. The ticker still clattered. I was staring at an inch of tape which bore the inscription XYZ32. You can read this more on page 86 and pass it on. It had been 52 that morning. I was finished, and so were many friends. The papers reported men jumping to death from the towers of high finance. That disgusted me. I would not jump. Went back to the bar. My friends had dropped several million since 10 o'clock. So what? Tomorrow was another day, and as I drank, the old fierce determination to win came back. So the next entry is The fierce determination to win came back. Can you relate to that? Meaning, I'm going to prove to the world that I am important. I'm going to make the boomerang. I'm, stuff like that. All right, here we go. Next morning, I telephoned a friend in Montreal. That person's name is Dick Johnson. He had plenty of money left and thought I'd better go to Canada. Okay, that's kind of weird. I've never had like a lot of money and thought I should contact someone who's got no money and say, why don't you come live off me? I mean, I just don't, this sentence is kind of strange. He had plenty of money left and thought I'd better go to Canada. By the following spring, we were living in our accustomed style. I felt like Napoleon returning from Elba. No St. Helena for me, but drinking caught up with me again, and my generous friend had to let me go. This time we stayed broke. So the doom curve is now we're living off other people, staying broke. Right here. These are the next two on the doom curve. We went to live with my wife's parents. Okay, now we're living off other people some more. I found a job, then lost it as a result of a brawl with a taxi driver. That you can read in detail on page 89 and pass it on. Mercifully, no one could guess that I was to have no real employment for 5 years and hardly draw a sober breath. So unemployable is the next thing on the doom curve. My wife began to work in a department store, coming home exhausted to find me drunk. All right. Again, Lois jumping in there and saving the day. I became an unwelcome hanger-on at brokerage places. You can read more about that sentence on page 97 and pass it on. This man, Joe, states that Bill was awful and he was alcoholic. So our doom curve from this particular passage is living off other people, staying broke, still living off other people, and unemployable. Here we go. Remember, it's still the Prohibition era from January 17th, 1920 to December 5th, 1933. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. That's the next entry. Liquor became required. And I always like to point out here that there are requirements no matter which way we go on this. We're required to do the things outlined in the book, or we're required to drink. What is your choice going to be? Which one will you work towards? So Bill could do the requirements of the disease or the requirements of treatment. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day and often 3 got to be routine. And so bathtub gin is something that happened during Prohibition where they made gin in bathtub. Sounds disgusting. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I'd run home to Lois and give her money for our household because she's working so hard. No, he did not do that. He would pay his bills at the bars and delicatessens. Those were the people or the places fronting him money to buy alcohol. So Bill just kept his dealer going, basically, and not bringing money home to the household. Alcohol was the priority. So this went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. So that would be the next thing, is shaking violently. A tumbler full of gin, followed by a half a dozen bottles of beer, would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation, and there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. So just stop here for a second and think about how bad this is. And he still was able to get a period of sobriety. A 30-day, a 60-day, a 90-day. So gradually things got worse. How could they get worse? Well, the people he was living off of were not, didn't have any more capacity to extend that. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. My mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. So it got worse because the people he's living off of couldn't continue to extend their generosity. Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at the low point of 1932, and I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a prodigious bender and the chance vanished. So that is explained in detail on page 91 and pass it on if you'd like to read about that. This is kind of an important moment because alcoholics, there's a sentence that says, tend to get tight at just the right moment, right? So just like we read in the doctor's opinion, soon, it's not a mental escape. It's not always a mental escape. So I woke up, this had to be stopped, and I saw I could not take so much as one drink. So Bill, at this moment, recognizes the phenomena of craving. He can see that once he puts alcohol in his body, he is off and running for a very long time. And so he's taken half of step one at this point, being convinced of the physical nature of alcoholism. I was through forever. Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business, and so I did. Here are just some notes that we've already talked about. So Bill just said that, he had a or a firm resolution not to drink again, basically. And what happened? Shortly afterward, I came home drunk. There had been no fight. Where had been my high resolve? This is the strange mental blank spot. It hadn't even come to mind. Let's go to the top of page 42 in the big book. They had said that though I did raise a defense, it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink. Well, just that did happen and more. For what I learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment I had an alcoholic mind, and I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. I had never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them helplessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow. The strange mental blank spot. This is an important part of the alcoholic mind that most people are not even aware is there, won't acknowledge it. And you'll hear that by hearing people talk about how they choose not to drink today. Oh, okay. Someone had pushed a drink my way and I had taken it. Was I crazy? I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. Renewing my resolve, remember the cycle of addiction from the doctor's opinion, with a firm resolution not to drink again, I tried again. Some time passed, and confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. I could laugh at the gin mills. Now I had what it takes. One day, I walked into a cafe to telephone, and in no time, I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened. As the whiskey rose to my head, as the phenomena of craving set in, I told myself I would manage better next time, but I might as well get good and drunk then, and I did. To suffer from alcoholism means to endure without a choice. Endure without a choice. Okay, so we have some more notes on the same passage. This confidence that he talks about. Some time passed and confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. This is self-confidence, self-reliance. And it seems he had enough willpower and was making too big a deal of this drinking thing. But the strange mental blank spot, which was, there was no mention of drinking, no plan, just baffled how it happened. I mean, he just walked in to a cafe to make a telephone call, and boom, there he is. The phenomena of craving sets in. He thinks he has a choice. And here we are. This is the drink that keeps Bill drunk for 2 years as a result of the strange mental blank spot. The remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. This is the next entry on our doom curve. The courage to do battle is not there. Remember, he had the fierce determination to win. He was going to manage vast enterprises with the utmost assurance. He is now beaten down and he has no courage to do battle. My brain raced uncontrollably and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. I hardly dared cross the street lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. An all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My writhing nerves are the next thing on the doom curve, were stilled at last. A morning paper told me the market had gone to hell. Well, so had I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. That was a hard thought. Should I kill myself? So the next thing on the doom curve is suicidal thoughts? No, not now. Then a mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that, so 2 bottles in oblivion. The mind and body are marvelous mechanisms, for mine endured this agony for 2 more years. Sometimes I stole from my wife's slender purse when the morning terror and madness were on me. Again, I swayed dizzily before an open window or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. So this is the suffering that precedes death. We're in the total suicidal phase. There were flights from city to country and back as my wife and I sought escape. Then came the night when the physical and mental torture were so hellish, I feared I would burst through my window, sash and all. Sash is the window border. Somehow, I managed to drag my mattress to a lower floor lest I suddenly leap. A doctor came with a heavy sedative. What? Drugs? Wait a minute. You don't talk about drugs in AA. Actually, drugs are mentioned 10 times in the big book. This combination soon landed me on the rocks. All right, so we can add dual addiction or drugs, but next thing on our doom curve. People feared for my sanity, so did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking and 40 pounds underweight. So that would be something to add on the doom curve. Being underweight or overweight, just not the right weight and not eating correctly. For more details on this period of sobriety, you can read about that in page 98 on Pass It On. He would actually, even though he was this thick and this far down, could get together 3 months of dry time. I think that's important to know. So Bill is now taking drugs. Drugs are mentioned a total of 10 times in the big book. Is he dually addicted? And we have malnutrition and dehydration. Malnutrition and dehydration. My brother-in-law is a physician. His brother-in-law's name is Leonard Strong. You can read about him on page 99 and Pass It On. And through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. So Leonard Strong arranged for Bill to get into Towns Hospital. Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Belladonna treatment is a drug used to prevent seizures during detox. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise help much. Best of all, I met a kind doctor, Dr. Silkworth, who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, I had been seriously ill bodily and mentally. So the bodily is the phenomena of craving, the allergy, metabolizing alcohol differently than a normie, and mentally, which is the obsession of the mind, an obsession is a persistent, reoccurring thought that does not respond to reason, coupled with a strange mental blank spot. A person suffering from this doesn't have a choice. They are sick. And the only way out is the psychic change. Okay. So it relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. My incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. Understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. That means he was having good fortune for 90 to 120 days of sobriety. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. Well, we know from page 39 in the first paragraph that self-knowledge isn't the answer. And it's in italics, so that means it's important, right? We're getting to the end of the doom curve. So self-knowledge wasn't the answer. But it was not, for the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. So this is where the doom curve comes from, is this curve that's shaped like a ski jump. And we're watching the progression of alcoholism. We're taking out from Bill's story the progression of alcoholism, and we're practicing introspection with ourselves. Is that my story? Is that my experience? Can I see that? Does that seem right? So this was the finish, the curtain, it seemed to me. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would all end with heart failure during DTs, or I would develop a wet brain, perhaps within a year. She would soon have to turn me over to the undertaker or the asylum. So this is the end of the doom curve, which ends in DTs, wet brain, undertaker, or asylum. And if I suggest you read page 108 to 111 and pass it on to truly feel this end of the doom curve for Bill and for Lois. This is expanded on multiple pages. They didn't need to tell me. I knew and almost welcomed the idea. It was a devastating blow to my pride. Pride, ego, self, page 62. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our trouble. So see what's happening here? The disease will beat down the ego. Or we can take the steps, which is the easier, softer way to get this ego in check. I, who had thought so well of myself and my abilities, of my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. Now I was to plunge into the dark, joining the endless procession of sots who had gone on before. I thought of my poor wife. There had been much happiness after all, what I would not give to make amends, but that was all over now. There's not much mention of Lois, but she was with him throughout the entire doom curve, right? And if you've circled all the I's, you can see how self-centered this chapter is. Here are some more notes that I have on this particular section. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity, a swamp of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. So this is Bill taking step one. But we must be convinced of A, B, and C in order to embrace the solution. He's getting there through continued drinking and using. He's getting there. See, we just don't have a choice. Okay, alcoholism is wringing him tight. We need to be convinced in order to embrace the solution. Remember the original manuscript A, B, and C. Remember what we learned from William James. The common denominator of all people that had a religious experience was being convinced that self had failed us. Active alcoholism will bring us there if we don't die first, or go through the investigation of the big book with an open mind, which is the beginning of the book to page 59, while being honest with ourselves. So we have two ways to do this, and that's it. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital, a broken man. Fear sobered me for a bit. Fear is a mental defense and doesn't work, as we know from page 43, the third paragraph. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. Then came the insidious insanity of the first drink, and on Armistice Day, which is November 11th, which is now we refer to as Veterans Day. You could read more about it and pass it on page 109 to 111. I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere or stumbled upon to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was the beginning of my last debauch. I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. So the debauch is a drinking spree, often coupled with uninhibited sexual activity. We can cross-reference the fourth dimension on page 25 on the first paragraph, which says there is a solution. Almost none of us liked the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, and the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for a successful consummation. Oh, that sounds a lot different than take what you want and leave the rest. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us to do but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we have not even dreamed. And our way of life, we are definitely going to read this passage right here. What is the way of life of the first 100 men and women? I would bet you money right now that it's different from 2024 AA. All right, so let's go look at page 85. I might have them down here. Oh gosh, I have a ton of notes on this one. Okay, I'm not going to try to explain the fourth dimension now, even though I have some notes on it here. The way of life is on a spiritual basis. Page 85 says a spiritual program of action. Page 83, second paragraph, life, spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. Bill never used these words when he was wealthy. So what is true wealth and success? Page 60, the fourth paragraph. That doesn't seem right. Oh, page 83, the fourth paragraph. This is true success here. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. There it is. Comprehend the word serenity and know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see that our experience can benefit others. God turning liabilities into assets. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. something money can't buy, right? Near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen. With a certain satisfaction, I reflected there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through that night and the next day. My wife was at work. I wondered whether I dare hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight. Go back to page 1 and read the last paragraph. Oops. 22 and a veteran of foreign wars, I win home at last. I fancied myself a leader, for not the men of my battery given me a special token of appreciation. My talent for leadership, I imagined, would place me at the head of vast enterprises, and I would manage with the utmost assurance. That was Bill, what he intended. That was his choice. It wasn't this, hiding a bottle of gin near the head of his bed, trying to hide it from his wife. Did Bill choose this place? No, no, he is suffering without a choice. This is the best that an intelligent, talented, and skilled businessman could get to by relying on his mind, self, or ego, right? This is about surrender of self. And we will get backed into that place through the disease, or we can take the steps, which is an easier, softer way. My musing was interrupted by the telephone. Uh-oh. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. He was sober. Oh no. It was years since I can remember him coming to New York in that condition. Oh my goodness. This is Ebby Thatcher. Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcoholic insanity, and I wonder how he escaped. Of course he would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him. Unmindful of his welfare, I thought only of recapturing the spirit of other days. There was that time we chartered an airplane to complete a jag. His coming was an oasis in the dreary desert of futility. The very thing, an oasis. Drinkers were like that. All right, there's some important information here. Bill Wilson is getting a 12-step call from a man with 60 days sober. What? What are the people with 60 days sober doing today in our fellowship? I would venture to say, I've heard it, I've seen it, I've witnessed it. People literally discourage people with 60 days sober trying to help someone else. Literally discourage it. When right here, we have the evidence of how the first people got sober and what worked. At 60 days, this man is approaching another man who's not sober, trying to carry the message. The door opened and he stood there, fresh skin and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? I pushed a drink across the table and he refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what got into the fellow. He wasn't himself. He looked straight at me, simply but smilingly. He said, "I've got religion." I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer, an alcohol crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right. But bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. So we have some things here to unpack. They were old drinking buddies, which you can read about on page 112 and pass it on. Recapturing the spirit, again, is mentioned on page 151 in our big book. Bill is testing Ebby's sobriety by giving him a drink. Bill's pushing him. And as soon as Ebby says the R word, religion, Bill's mind snaps shut. Boom, closed mind, right? What do we know from Appendix 2? An open mind to all spiritual concepts is a requirement. We also know from page 42 that we're not going to go in hot and heavy, come in hot with religion right off the gate, right from the start. we first need to do the mental and physical differences in being an alcoholic. So what happened is Ebby has sparked the prejudice Bill has against religion, which is a preconceived idea without due examination of the facts. Bill is filled with superiority and selfishness in this exchange right here. He's wanting him to get drunk. He wants to reminisce about the past. He's not concerned about everything sober, right? There's a lot going on in this particular passage. But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how two men, those men were Roland Hazard and Zebra Graves, had appeared in court persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. So Ebby Thatcher actually was outside of his house with a shotgun, shooting at pigeons that were landing at his house, got in trouble with the law. Well, the Oxford group people, Roland Hazard and Zebra Graves, they were trying to do their, working with others and carry their message. So they said to the judge, hey, we know this guy's an alcoholic crackpot, but why don't you leave him with us for a little bit and let us try to get him sober. So they, Roland and Zebra, told of a simple religious idea, the Oxford group, and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, 60 days, and the result was self-evident. It had worked. So let's stop here for just a second. The simple religious idea you can read on page 113 and pass it on. I'm sure you've heard about it. It's the 4 absolutes. The practical program of action we are going to read right now. Please go to the top of page 263. It's in the story, He Sold Himself Short. He had Dr. Bob's afternoon off. He had me to the office and we spent 3 or 4 hours formally going through the 6-step program as it was at that time. The 6 steps were, number 1, complete deflation. My question to you is complete deflation of what? Pride, ego, self. Number 2, dependence and guidance from a higher power. Number 3, moral inventory. Number 4, confession. 5, restitution. And number 6, continued work with alcoholics. Not the commencement, not the start, not when we first engage in it, but it's continued work with alcoholics as if it's been happening the whole time. See, these first group of people that got sober did not wait to start working with others. It was a part of their rehabilitation. It's something that they did from the gate. And that is a remarkable difference of what's going on in 2024. Do you have your sponsees at 60 days work with other alcoholics? Have you prepared them for that? Have you trained them for that? Have you given them any instruction at all? Or are they supposed to magically get through 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, the hard steps where we need ease and comfort without working with others, and then one day they'll magically be at step 12? And is there a ceremony or a certificate, a phone call, a text? What happens when it's that person you think is finally ready to work with other alcoholics? I say forget it. Look, we know that Dr. Silkworth let Bill, at just a few days sober, talk to the other patients. We know that this judge right here let Roland Hazard and Zebra work with EBT. If our institutions are allowing it to happen, why can't we embrace that just as members of Alcoholics Anonymous? So what had he come to do? Did he come to talk about his drunkalog for an hour? He had come to pass his experience along to me. All right, let's see how he does that. If I cared to have it. And I was shocked, but interested. Certainly I was interested, but I had to be. I was hopeless. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays way over there on the hillside. There was that proffered temperance pledge I never signed. My grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings. His insistence that the Spears really had their music. but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen, his fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. That wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back. I had always believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are. For what that means, blind faith in the strange proposition that the universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. Kind of sounds like my life as an alcoholic. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggested vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay it all. How could there be so much of precise and immutable law and no intelligence? I simply had to believe in a spirit of the universe who knew neither time nor limitation, but that was as far as I had gone. With ministers and the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me who was love, superhuman strength, and direction, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against a theory. So the mind snapping shut is prejudice. And here we have all of the places where prejudice is mentioned in our big book. So we are going to read those and then probably pause. I have lost track of time. It just feels like 5 minutes has passed. Okay, so page 12, the first paragraph. Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me vestiges of my old prejudice. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. When the thought was expressed to me that there might be a God personal, this feeling was intensified. All right, same page, fifth paragraph. Thus was I convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. At long last, I saw, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. Page 46, the first paragraph. Yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. Let us make haste to reassure you. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend the power which is God. Page 47, first paragraph. When therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. This applies too to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. At the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth. So those are actual directions, and that's the exercise from page 47. Okay, top of page 48. We found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. Page 49, the second paragraph. We who have traveled this dubious path beg you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. Page 55, the fourth paragraph. 1, 2, 3, 4. We can only clear the ground a bit if our testimony helps you sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself. Then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. Page 93, the first paragraph. When dealing with such a person, you had better use everyday language to describe spiritual principles. There is no use arousing any prejudice he may have against certain theological terms and conceptions about which he may already be confused. Don't raise such issues, no matter what your own convictions are. Okay, well, that's we've got to page 10. We've done 10 pages, and now you're aware of the incredible amount of prejudice that unrecovered alcoholics have. And this needs to be faced. This is a part of what we're doing, right? The steps are a process of facing and removing the obstacles within me so that I can have conscious contact, an awakening, an experience of the great reality within.